Today I want to show you two free plugins that are perfect for mastering to help you get louder masters that don't sound like they're crushed and don't sound like they're pumping. Both of these plugins are free and can help kind of fill in a space depending on what DAW that you're using. But either way, they're ones that no matter what DAW you're in, I think are great to know about. First up, we have K-Clip by Kazrog. This is a great clipper. And a clipper is something that just clips off the top of the transients, which is particularly helpful if you're working on music with drums in it, because those big transient peaks, if you push them down too hard with a limiter, they kind of feel squashed. But there's something about clipping them, as long as you're not clipping too much, it technically is saturating it, but you don't lose the dynamic of that drum, and it allows you to get a little bit more loudness out of your overall master. So that's first up. The second plugin is a great free limiter plugin that's a true peak limiter, which is important. It's called Wavebreaker by Press Play, and it's just a very, very good free limiter. Now, if you're working in Logic, I think Logic's stock adaptive limiter is a great limiter, but if you don't like working with it, or you just want another limiting option in case for some reason it's just not sounding right with your current limiter, Wavebreaker is a great free option. And if you are working in GarageBand, in my opinion, the GarageBand limiter is awful. So this is a much, much better improvement, at least in terms of visual. The GarageBand limiter is the same limiter as in Logic. It just doesn't have all the visual information that's very important when you're mastering. So let's go and jump into Logic, but this will work for free for you if you're in GarageBand as well. So here are both of the plugins. On the left, we have K-Clip. On the right, we have Wavebreaker. And if you don't know much about mastering, this is going to be kind of like a mini half mastering masterclass, where we're going to go through the making it loud part of mastering. So in mastering, you have two main goals. You are making sure the tone is right so that your song is going to sound good up against other professional releases and up against other songs either on the same EP or album or your catalog if you have multiple songs out. So making sure the tone is right, and then you're bringing it up to commercial volume. And ideally, in a dream world, you've nailed the tone part during mixing, and you are just now bringing it up to commercial volume. You're increasing the loudness so it will sit next to your other releases and other commercial releases. You don't want it to sound way quieter after commercial release. I am not an advocate for just pushing for the loudest possible thing that you could do and crushing your mix and making your mix technically sound bad just for the sake of loudness, but I am an advocate for trying to be competitive with your music so that your music doesn't sound extremely amateurish because it's just way too quiet. So in this video, we're not going to touch the tone part of mastering. I'll link to a video above here for Logic on mastering, and I'll link to a video above here for GarageBand on mastering that goes through the entire process, and you could then factor these plugins into that process. But we're going to get really in depth into how you can use these two plugins to get an even louder master that you've probably gotten before. So first up, let's just talk about the clipper. So we're going to bypass Wavebreaker here and close that for now. We're focusing on this clipper plugin, and as I said, a clipper is just going to clip off the loudest peaks in your song. So if we look at our song here, see all those big peaks? Those biggest peaks, our ears can't really perceive those super, super spiky peaks. So if we just clip off the transients, or typically drums, we likely won't hear it. And I'll show you at the end how to make sure that you're really not hearing any of the clipping. But if as long as you're not hearing it, then you have just made a little more headroom for you to now increase the total volume of your master. And before we actually start processing, I just want to really drive home, mastering is not going to make your mix sound amazing. If you aren't happy with the sound of your mixes, I want to give you something for free to help out with that. It's my 6-step checklist to a pro mix. Just goes through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how to do them. This song that we're mastering here was mixed through that process live on this channel, so you could watch that entire mixing as well. But I really want you to get the free 6-step checklist, because then you can reference back to it anytime you're mixing music in the future, and it's free. So be sure to grab it. But let's go ahead and clip this song so that we can make it really loud. So we want to link the input and output, and then we just want to turn this knob until we're seeing it push down just a little bit. You'll see these red indicators come up. Cool. So we can see here visually what is being clipped, how much clipping is happening, and that we've turned up our mix or created basically 6 decibels of headroom in our mix that we can now use the limiter to pull up. So really quickly, we have an input and an output. We linked those so that we're not actually adding any volume here. We're going to do that with the limiter. And then we clipped off the biggest peaks. Generally speaking, I don't like this soften because it actually makes it a soft clipper, which is going to distort around the signal a little bit more. That can work. It's more of an effect though. So for mastering in general, I haven't been using the soft clipping function with this clipper. So all you have to do is hit link, turn it up until you are seeing some amount of clipping, but not hearing any audible distortion. And just to show you what that distortion sounds like. Sounds bad, right? So just make sure that you're not hearing any audible distortion. If you're not sure, scale it back. You really don't want to add distortion that you're just not noticing and end up hurting your mix instead of helping it. Okay, so that's the clipper, super easy to set. And then this wave breaker plugin, again, this is particularly important if you're working in GarageBand because the limiter in GarageBand is terrible, but even in Logic, this is a really great sounding limiter and it's free, so why not grab it? So the only 2 functions that you really need to focus on with this limiter are your threshold and then your drive. The drive is just going to be pushing up into the threshold now that we've set it. So our threshold is a brick wall. Sound can't pass that. That way it's not going to digitally distort. If you get to what's called digital 0, it's just going to start distorting really nasty, kind of like you just heard with the clipper. So we set a threshold and then our song can't move past it. It's going to push down any hits that try to move past it. That's why the clipper first helps us get more headroom because we are then pushing down less on our mix. So personally, I master to -0.3. So I'm just putting my threshold to -0.3. Okay, so now that we've set that, all we have to do is increase our drive and watch our gain reduction over here on this meter, and you can also look at it up here. But here you're able to see how many decibels of gain reduction you're getting or how much it's pushing down the loudest part of your song. Okay, so that's a good starting point for me. Typically what I'm looking for on my first limiter, we're actually gonna do a second limiter here in a second, is that I just wanna see it's getting, maybe 2-ish decibels and I'm not hearing too much pumping. I'm mostly just trying to shave off the biggest peaks with my first limiter, and then I do a second limiter, so each limiter is working a little less hard. That's catching just a little bit more of the entire song. So we're gonna actually add another instance of wave breaker here. I'm gonna close that, and we're going to change our threshold again to -0.3. And then we're just going to drive up into it a little bit more to get just a little bit more limit. Okay, cool. Okay, so if I turn all of this off now, our song sounded like this before. Turn it back on. So we've increased the loudness a lot, but it also makes it hard for us to accurately assess exactly what we've done if we actually like the sound of this increased volume, if the limiting and clipping is actually benefiting the sound or potentially hurting it. Ideally, at every stage of the process, from recording to mixing to mastering, you want to actually improve the sound a little bit, right? And so we'd like for it to sound better ideally, or at least do no harm. If it's done no harm, but it's significantly louder, then that's also cool, but ideally improved as well. So I always keep an unmastered version that I can quickly compare my mix back to. And all I need to do for that is just turn my mix down until it's roughly the same volume as this unmastered version. So let's just bring it down until it's roughly the same volume. Cool. Okay, so I can hear it's maybe a little bit more compressed, but in my opinion, not in a way that's hurting the song. It's just making it feel a little bit more gelled together, maybe even in some ways more powerful. We're losing a slight amount of punch from the drums, but not so much that I feel like it's hurting the mix, which is what we're going for. And then if we go to another section of the song, let's say this verse here. Instead of giving out the names, and back to our unmastered. Instead of lying that you're stable. I actually feel like that's very interesting. Listen how it just feels more present, right? Check us out. So this is the mastered, this is the unmastered. This feels a little flatter. This feels more open, bigger. Smaller, more open. It's interesting. So we're gaining a little bit of volume in those quieter sections. It's making it feel a little bit more powerful, a little bit more open. And then in the loudest sections, it's pushing down on it a little bit. But in my opinion, to my ears, at least in the confines of filming this video, it doesn't sound like too much to me. I might tweak it further if I was going on for the full mastering process with this. But you get the idea. So 2 free plugins you should know about. K-Clip 0 by Kazrog. We're just doing a very slight amount of clipping on the loudest peaks of our song, not enough that I actually hear any of the distortion that clipping technically causes. So basically imperceivable clipping that's allowing us to then push our master up a few extra decibels than we'd be able to without clipping. And then we're using 2 instances of this wave breaker plugin where all we had to do was set our threshold and then our drive and keep an eye on our gain reduction, which is what you don't get in GarageBand. And it's just a very different looking meter than you get in Logic. So depending on what you want, this is just a different looking meter. And we got enough loudness now for our song to likely be able to compete against other commercial releases, which is really great. Now, before you go, again, if you're struggling to get a mix that you're happy with, be sure to grab that 6-step checklist to a pro mix. It's completely free. It's helped out thousands of people already. I know it's going to help you out. So be sure to grab it from the link in the description below. I'd also love to hear from you. Have you heard of either of these plugins? Or are there any other free plugins that I should know about that I should bring to this channel? Let me know in the comments below. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video. One thing at a time.